This podcast includes graphic depictions of true crime cases and may contain explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Hey, this is Robin.
This is Jackie.
And this is Amanda.
And you are listening to We Saw the Devil, a podcast dedicated to horror, true crime, and all things macabre. If you want to follow us between shows, don't forget to check us out online. You can go to our website at www.wesawthedevil.com. You can follow us on Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast or on Twitter at We Saw the Devil. And if you want to follow specific co-hosts' social media, you can find the links to those on our website as well. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of We Saw the Devil. Tonight's episode is going to be part one of our East Area Rapist / original Night Stalker / Golden State Killer / Joseph James DeAngelo.
/ the worst person on this planet.
So, as we discussed earlier and mentioned a couple times in previous episodes, we were going to do a multi-part deep dive into this case because it is so complex. It spans decades, and there was just so much information. So when we started to do the research and started going through the case, in terms of doing a podcast on it, we noticed that there are some amazing resources out there.
There's a lot. There's a lot of everything.
The LA Times produced a podcast as well on it that had some amazing interviews. Paul Holes himself has repeatedly done podcast episodes, interviews, and so forth about the case. So we felt like it would probably be time better spent if we did a very broad overview of the case instead.
Mm-hmm. And I would say we deep dove into a decent amount, but we thought it might be fun to treat it kind of like the Vallow case we've been following, whereas we'll get everyone caught up and then we'll follow the case as it progresses through the court system.
Yes, because what surprised me as well is how few people actually know of him.
Right, or they know one aspect of the case.
Exactly. So this is still an active case. He is currently in custody. And like Amanda just said, we will be following this case and doing updates. I believe we have an upcoming court date for him.
Yes, but I believe the one that was supposed to be this week has moved again due to the world being crazy right now.
Yes, it looks like his next court date was scheduled for April 22nd, so tomorrow, and it just got rescheduled to May 12th. So we will continue providing updates and following this case as it snakes through the court system.
Mm-hmm. And we thought it would be kind of fun because it's the anniversary of when he was finally arrested, too, this week.
Yes, it is. That is correct. In 3 days, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into that, Amanda, tell us about our Patreon.
So, yes, our patrons are amazing, and we thank you so much for the support. We have Amy, Derek, Michelle, Nikki, and Shawna F. And then our executive producers, thank you, Ian, Iris, and Shawna S. And again, we have some goodies coming out. I just actually hand wrote everyone's notes today. Today's the 21st. And also for our new subscribers, so Shawna and Michelle, you will also be getting your sticker in the mail. So thank you, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And also, we have a new Patreon-only episode coming out on Friday. And I posted a little teaser image on Instagram and our social media accounts, which those are some creepy fucking hands.
Oh my gosh, when I first saw them, I'm like, no, those aren't people hands. It's a pretty crazy case, so there's a lot of creepy aspects to it. We're not going to give it away, but it involves a lot of different gruesome things, including killing children,
necrophilia,
cannibalism. It's pretty yucky, guys, so pretty intense. If you are not already a patron, think about, following us on there. It's patreon.com/WeSawTheDevil. We have a lot of goodies. We have merch. And like I just mentioned, I handwrite you postcards. It's pretty exciting.
A community just for patrons, and you can get a t-shirt, stickers, different merch, access to Patreon only episodes, and even a poster. So If you like the show, enjoy what we do, and want to support, I know times are tough right now. The world seems to be ending, but we really appreciate each and every patron that we have. And feel free to check us out if you would like to support the show. We want to make this the show that everyone deserves.
Mm-hmm. And then this case was actually recommended to us to cover by our patrons.
It was. And that is, depending on your tier level, we do allow you to vote on the cases that we cover because, you know, we are very interested in true crime, but ultimately we enjoy doing things that people want to listen to and people want us to talk about. So,
right. And if you can't join us on Patreon just yet, we totally understand. Feel free to connect with us on all the other social media platforms. So we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We love hearing from everyone. So thank you for the people that take the time to do that as well.
Yes. And again, you can find us on Facebook at We Saw the Devil. You can find us on Twitter at We Saw the Devil. Our website is WeSawTheDevil.com, and our Instagram is We Saw the Devil Podcast. Now, you can also, if you have questions, concerns, commentary, complaints, anything really, you can email us at WeSawTheDevil@gmail.com. We love hearing from you, and we will do our best to get back to you as soon as possible.
Yes. So, you ready?
I'm ready. We decided, now I've been covering this case probably for like 10, 12 years at this point. Now, I was in the pro boards back in the day when Michelle McNamara hadn't even thought of her book quite yet. It's really intense and it's really, really crazy just how many different pieces and puzzles, and as we've discussed on previous episodes, how many serial killers or criminals in general do you know who have like 40 different names and monikers?
Right. And when I was introduced to this case, I actually remember hearing about the original Night Stalker. And we kind of touched on him when we did our Richard Ramirez show a while back. And then just seeing that he was actually the person that committed a bunch of different crimes under different names blew my mind. There's so many, and I'm just like, how? How did someone let this happen?
No, it's crazy. And, you know, as I stated earlier, it spans decades. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to discuss. So we're going to start out in this episode and kind of just discuss the man, right? Because I feel like so much information out there is solely about crimes that they committed. And we will definitely be covering all the crimes. But we're going to actually discuss his background because he has a very interesting background as well. So, with that being said, Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested, as Amanda mentioned, this week is the anniversary, on April 24th of 2018. An armored van parked outside of his home in Citrus Heights, California, which is a suburb of Sacramento. An entire SWAT team from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department waited outside. And Joseph James DeAngelo was 72 years old when he was arrested, and he was arrested because he shared DNA markers with someone on GEDmatch.com. Now, if you're not aware of what that is, that's where, say, you get a DNA test done with 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and you can further run it through GED Match and find even further, ancestors. It actually has really cool breakdowns of hunters and gatherers and which exact group that you share with in the world. It really deep dives into the DNA and ancestral DNA aspect, right? They found, I believe, a fourth cousin, and they got in a genealogist to help track down people who could potentially fit the age profile. So Joseph James DeAngelo, 72-year-old man living in the Sacramento suburbs, became the suspect in this case. They had some evidence, a sample from the East Area Rapist Golden State Killer crimes that they were running in against the database.
Yeah, and just the way that they put it all together. I know I did a case with the Cook brothers a couple weeks ago where they used DNA evidence years later to get the additional brother. And this was super similar how, years later, he's 72 years old, and then he finally got caught.
And the investigation was conducted over a very long period of time because officials in Sacramento County, the district attorney, Anne Marie Schubert, now you may have seen her. She's in every documentary or show about this case. So that crime lab explored online family trees that matched the DNA samples that they had run from the East Area Rapist crime. They had some semen samples. And they just went down those trees and discovered whether people were potential suspects based on where they lived, age, gender, so on and so forth, right? And he popped up, and he had been living literally amongst his crimes almost his entire life.
Mm-hmm. And that's crazy. He had a family. He had kids.
A job that he had worked, for a very long time. So he was, in fact, arrested for this on April 24th of 2018. And Sheriff Scott Jones commented on the arrest. Now, I remember the day that it happened. I got a notice on my phone. I was screaming. So Sheriff Scott Jones said, when he came out of his residence, we had a team in place that was able to take him into custody. He was very surprised by that. It looked as though he may have been searching in his mind to execute a particular plan he may have had in mind. Obviously, speculation on my part, but he was not given that opportunity. It happened almost instantaneously, and he was taken into custody without incident at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it came out that he had an entire cache of guns. I'm talking about he had, like, the last number that I could find, like 50-something guns, possibly in the 70s.
My gosh.
But the most important piece of that is that he told them that he had a roast on the stove or in the oven.
That's why he had to go back inside.
That's why he had to go back.
That's just crazy. And as far as like all the horrendous things that he's done, the sad part is he can't be tried for all of them.
If you have been listening or if you're familiar, he is credited with at least 12 murders, over 51 rapes, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of burglaries. And that's just ones that people are, suspicious of or confirm. Because the interesting piece about this case is that he went through phases. He's known by many different names based on the phase and his MO. So the only way that they're actually able to really connect the crimes as a whole, because it spans so many decades, is based on MO. After he was arrested, he was charged with the 2 counts of murder with special circumstance in Sacramento County for the murder of Brian and Kate Maggiore from February of 1978. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with 3 special circumstances: murder during commission of rape, murder during commission of burglary, and multiple murders. So he was also charged in Ventura County for the murder of Lyman and Charlene Smith. He is not being charged with even a minute fraction of the crimes that he actually committed.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of those too are just, especially like the rapes, those are just the people that came forward, and that were investigated at the time, but nothing ever came of it.
And don't forget that in the 70s and 80s, I mean, my God, it's still even occurring that women, if they are raped, sometimes they're, told that it's their fault, or they're embarrassed of it, or even when, and we'll get into, full MO discussions and how he committed crimes and what he did, but especially in that time, he operated from 1974 to mid-1986. So all of his crimes took place in California that we're aware of.
Right.
Pretty much span the entire length of California.
And those dates also, there's a lot of speculation that it happened before then. Those are the dates. Yeah, we'll talk about all of his crimes, but there's a lot more that isn't even on here.
And then also, likewise, things that happened before. What did he do? Just in 1986 stop? Someone who commits heinous crimes like this typically don't just be like, oh, okay, well, it's January 1st, 1986. I'm done. I'm hanging up my hat. So it's crazy, though. So, all of his attacks lasted over a decade. Only scattered bits and pieces have previously been known about him. And as we said in the beginning, right, like there are entire forums dedicated to this case that you can find his legal documents, his Navy records, his really in-depth information. And there's so much information in this case. We decided to kind of do a generic, an overview of him and his crimes.
Get caught up and we'll keep going.
So we do suggest you listening to podcasts, and we'll put that in our resources. I'll create a page for this on our website, and also include different resources and podcasts and places if you want to really deep dive and read more on this. What do we know about his early life, Amanda?
So just this guy's a monster, just all around monster. Raping people, killing people, breaking into their homes, stealing stuff, just all around terrible. Now, I think the worst thing about this is, again, we know of at least 51 rapes. Those people will not get full justice for it.
It is an absolute grievous insult to at least 50 women, at least. And the number, I mean, the actual number, they're saying possibly up to 200 women were raped by this man. And any woman who was raped by Joseph James DeAngelo, they can come forward all they want, but their case cannot be tried. There cannot be, he cannot be prosecuted for those crimes. And that is because California previously had the statute of limitations on prosecuting rape cases up until 2016. So California just eliminated the statute of limitations on rape cases. So new law, right? New law applies to crimes committed after January 1st of 2017. That means that any person, who is raped January 1st, 2017 or forward, can at any point in their life prosecute their rapist, right? No statute of limitations. So when Joseph James DeAngelo was operating, there was only a 10-year statute of limitations on prosecution. So, up to 200 women, speculative, at least 50 who have come forward, right, he cannot be tried for their rapes. So, in a sense, it's so monstrous that, they're almost, because he's arrested and all of this is being brought into the forefront, they're being victimized all over again.
Right. It hurts my heart, listening to some of them recount this. There's a lot of interviews, and it's so unbelievably sad because you can tell, how long did he get away with this? And then on top of it, oh, by the way, he can't get in trouble for what he did to you. The murders count. So if you die, then sure. But if he,
right,
does that to you and ruins a lot of your life because of it, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, he would rape women. We'll get into his MO again, like I said, but he destroyed thousands of people. He affected thousands of people, destroyed families, husbands and wives, children. I mean, he destroyed lives. And right, unfortunately, the vast majority of his victims cannot get actual legal justice. So it's terrible. Where do you think it began?
So, just to do kind of a life overview, and then we are going to go into his crimes next time. Again, there's a lot of information about him. So, he was born in 1945 in Bath, New York. His parents are Joseph James DeAngelo Sr. He was a U.S. airman. And then Kathleen Louise DeGroat. She was a waitress at Denny's, and her last name did change after she remarried. His father died in South Korea in 1995. The Social Security Death Index says February 15th, 1995. He was in the armed forces. And then his mother remarried, like I just said, to Jack Basanko. And she died in 2010 at 87 years old. So she never knew what a monster her son was.
Yes.
Her tombstone says Ramblin' Rose, although no one is sure why. I know there's a couple songs, right? Ramblin' Rose?
Yeah.
He has 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. And this comes into play a little bit about his teenage years. One thing that happened that is super unfortunate, and I mean, I've seen a lot of people try to link it, this is why he did it. But, there's no reason to ever do it. But something horrible did happen to him and his sister. When he was about 9 or 10, they were living in West Germany on the Air Force Base. Him and his younger sister, Constance, who was 7 at the time, would play in an abandoned warehouse. I don't know why they'd let kids play in there, but, But while they were playing, 2 airmen walked in and they raped Constance in front of him. So that is horrible. Your younger sister, he was 9 or 10, and to see that happen, I'm sure put a big mark in, in his life.
And unfortunately, Constance died of cancer in 2017, but apparently recounted that story to her son, Jesse Ryland, who has come public with it.
That's sad. Yeah. DeAngelo and his family, during his teenage years, lived in Auburn. So that's in California.
He attended Mills Junior High School in Rancho Cordova.
And that'll come to play why that name is so familiar for a lot of you.
Yes.
So his father wasn't seen around much. So again, he was in the Air Force. They transferred him to Korea and then to Florida. And then the rest of the family stayed in California. So his father had purchased a tract home. And from every recount that I've read or any of the interviews with a lot of the people that were in his life at this time, they said everything was mortgaged. So they were paying on every single thing that they owned, including furniture and stuff. So his mother worked at Denny's, and during this time when the dad was in Korea and Florida, she started dating someone. So she started dating a traveling welder, and at the time he also had a spouse and kids. So while all of this was going on, Joseph kind of took over the household duties. So he took care of the siblings, he cooked, he did all the stuff his mom should have been doing. I guess that kind of led to him and his mom having a weird relationship where they'd fight quite a bit. So because of this, you know, Joe did have friends. So he had a friend in junior high, and he kind of like mixed with his family. So in a lot of the information about him, they call it his surrogate family because they were like the stand-in model family. I think it was more just, you know, he wanted to be a child and he wanted a parent and a family life where he wasn't the responsible one, would be my guess. And honestly, who wouldn't? So this family kind of took him in. They treated him just like their own. Okay, so as far as the surrogate family, again, that's what everyone calls it, so I'm gonna follow suit. It was Joe's best friend, and he had 8 siblings. So it was a pretty big family.
Yeah.
One of his siblings, probably the one that everyone's heard of, her name's Judy. So she's the one that did a couple interviews with LA Times. So there is a couple interviews with her where she just kind of talks about, you know, their childhood. At one point, though, she does mention that while she was a young woman still living at her parents' house, there was someone outside her window. And so there was a peeping Tom. She's thinking that this might have been one of the first times that Joseph did this.
Scary.
As we'll talk about later. But I guess she's like, there was someone outside my window, and one of her brothers went out the next morning and saw shoe prints outside her window. So super creepy. She talked about the family dynamic versus Joe's. Her family was super loving, close family. Both parents were in the picture, and Joe's was pretty much the opposite. He took care of the kids. He did stuff alone for the most part. He wasn't very open with his feelings, just kind of reserved. So the family, like I said, treated him as their own. They even, the mom gave him the girl talk when she gave it to the other boys. They also had his school picture up with the rest of the kids' photos. So I feel like as much as like his family sucked, like this family that took him in gave him love.
That's really sweet. Like, how many people have you heard of, even just like friends, right, who would put up your school picture as part of their families?
Right. And, you know, so many people that we talk about were like, their childhood was shit. They had no love. They were beaten. They were, you know, all of this. And like, I don't know what, you know, his mom was doing, or maybe her, you know, boyfriend at the time, or what his dad did. I think he was pretty hard on him, but he had this love from a family. So it is different from the typical monster that we talk about. So he actually called Judy's parents mom and pop. I mean, that's as close as you can get to a family. She also recounts that at one point he did get in a fight with a bully, and she thought it was weird that once the fight was over, he never really talked about it again. So most people, if they got in a fight, you know, like it would be something to discuss, and he just all done, all over with, never again. So this continued through high school. So he went to high school. His friend was still there too. And he ended up actually leaving and getting his GED in 1964. From what I could find, his best friend quit high school and joined the military. And it seems like Joe kind of followed in his footsteps. It also was noted that he was on the junior varsity baseball team.
Yes.
So again, totally different from the normal person we would talk about in this type of case, right? A lot of them were like super reserved, never popular, never had any sort of relationships with anyone. And this guy just seems like it was a totally normal middle and high school, right?
Yeah.
So in September of 1964, he joined the Navy. And this is kind of a big debate that I found, is some people say he was in the Navy for 4 years, and others speculate that it was less.
Yeah, I've heard that he spent 3 years and then actually left like a month before his 4-year contract was up. Like Amanda said, there's varying accounts to that.
Yeah.
I mean, even people who have seen the documents in his release in DDT, whatever form, like people speculate, you know, people say that he only spent 3 and then some people 4. So.
Right.
So DeAngelo attended and graduated Navy RTC in San Diego from October to December of 1964. He served aboard the Boston-class guided missile cruiser USS Canberra during the Vietnam War, according to military officials. And this is also something that's been highly debatable, is if he actually saw combat.
Right. Some of the interviews that I saw, basically he told, I want to say it was Judy, that nothing really happened. He hurt, for example, we'll talk about it too, an injury to his hand. He told certain people that it was like a war injury. Yeah. And then others, he said, oh, it was a mistake. Like it was just a freak accident. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's unknown, but he was awarded a National Defense Service Medal, a Vietnam Service Medal, which is a Bronze Star, and a Vietnam Campaign Medal. He earned the Bronze Star for going above and beyond and was promoted to E5, which is Petty Officer Second Class, PO2, after 2 years of service. As Amanda said, he did have a hand injury, so he actually, which is important to the case, because he lost a finger.
Like a tip of a finger, from what I understood.
Yep, it's a good chunk of a tip of a finger was lost. So while he is in the Navy, his mom and dad divorce. So, I mean, she was dating somebody else. He was she'd moved on, and he was in the military, so probably natural, events.
Right.
But they get divorced. And while he was in the Navy, he worked as a damage controlman, which basically consists of firefighting, maintenance, and emergency repair work. So he specialized in emergency repairs that the ship would need, in case of attack, emergencies, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. He originally wanted to fly planes, but never was able to do that. And he was honorably discharged. So when he returned home, his mother had already married the welder, Jack Basanko. And back in Auburn, he moved in with his mom and stepdad.
Right. And that was about August 1968. There is another article that's published in one of the papers saying he came home, but it doesn't match up with the date. So I'm wondering if he went back and then, back into the military or was doing another tour. I don't know. And then came back. But there is an article floating around that has a strange date. But ultimately, from what it looks like, he returned for good in August of 1968.
Mm-hmm. And then he went to college. And Amanda, do you want to talk about college?
Oh my gosh, poor girl. So
I know.
So he attended Sierra College in Rockland, California. This is a significant life event because this is where he met Bonnie Jean Colwell.
Oh, poor girl.
This poor girl. So later, and again, we'll talk about his crimes, but her name comes up in the crimes, even though she is not related to the crimes in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, Bonnie is a very, very, very central figure to this case, even though she had literally nothing to do with anything.
Oddly enough, yeah. So when they met, she was a sophomore at the time, and she was 18. He was 23, so, a bit older. She worked as a lab assistant in the science department. So the story of how they met is she had taken some birds out to help them, learn to fly. She was out in, the courtyard type area. And basically one of the birds kind of made a scene with her, and it caught his attention. I feel so bad for her. Just, how a silly event can change your life significantly. This bird making a scene with her changed her life.
The fuck that bird. I wonder if she literally has a personal vendetta against that bird because God.
Right? So sad. So again, that caught his attention and he began to talk with her. And then as it progressed, he began going to the lab where she worked and talking with her and other students. And he came across as a pretty normal guy. Within the first week, he asked her out and they began dating. Now, when they started dating, Bonnie's father wasn't into it. So he didn't like an older man dating his daughter, which clearly, yeah, be concerned. But he warmed up once he found out that he was a veteran because he himself was also a veteran. So they kind of bonded over that. So here again is where the finger thing plays a role. So Joseph told them that Bonnie and her father that it was a military injury, that it was a stray bullet. And now when Judy recounts the incident, she says it was a barrel that slid over his finger and cut the tip off. I have no idea which one is right. I'm going to say, just because of what I know about him now, I'm going to think that he was lying, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. The records are kind of hard to find in that sense. So the military records that we were able to look at didn't show a combat injury. And that's another debate, is if his ship ever really truly did see fire. So they were pretty opposite personalities. So a lot of people thought it was kind of strange in a sense that they were even dating, because they were so different from each other. He was very much a rule breaker and she was very much a rule follower. There's a couple different instances that Bonnie has talked about. And again, she did a couple interviews where, she talked about how he'd go hunting without a license and she didn't like that. They would sneak into restricted areas to spear frogs, which, what kind of date is that?
Right.
No, thank you. But Bonnie wasn't a fan of it. She also talks about a motorcycle ride that made her super uncomfortable. He was like going really fast and around canyons and stuff. And
it took joy in her being uncomfortable and scared.
Yeah. And she mentioned that. She's just like, I feel like he liked seeing me so worried. And that just, like, first off, if your dates are that, it should have been over. Like, not anyone's fault, but like, who thinks that that's okay to do to someone? Again, no, she didn't do anything wrong. And it's sad that her name is even brought into this, because the only reason we're going through their relationship is because her name plays a part in some of the rapes later. Now, she also says that at one point when they were on the motorcycle, a German Shepherd would chase the bike. And at one point he got too close and Joseph like kicked it and snapped its neck.
That would have been done. I would have like stopped, dropped, and rolled off of that motorcycle, like,
seriously,
and been like, "Peace, bitch."
Yeah, you don't kill dogs. And in this case, I will say, out of all of the cases we've ever researched, looked at, even just read about, true crime in general, this is the case where I had to take a break. Not necessarily, I'm sad for this German Shepherd too, but as it progresses, his cruelty to dogs, I actually had to take a break. So, this is horrible. She also recounted that at one point he got her to shoot, like, was teaching her to use a gun and like loved that she was using this gun. And she shot a dove and he grabbed it and like tore the breast meat off immediately. It just got shot and he's just like tearing it apart. Just no, thank you. A lot of articles too talks about their taste in music. So she was really into Simon and Garfunkel, and he, and again, this will play a role, was really into the Doors. So he would turn the Doors on when they had sex, which was very strange. I guess, Bonnie was a virgin before him. And when she was interviewed, she talked about how sex with Joe was super painful and just some weird details, that he had complete control over his body and how he like trained himself. What does he say? He trained himself to have mastery over his body. So the LA Times did this little excerpt about how when he was climaxing, he would break away from her, then return minutes later and resume doing it all over again. He would repeat the pattern 4 or 5 times over like 3 hours. And again, this part plays a role in it again, right? In the rapes later. She just said, yeah, it was very painful and it would never end.
Yeah, they would have intercourse 4 to 5 times in a row that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 8 months into their relationship, he gave Bonnie a diamond ring that he said he got in Vietnam. Bonnie, when interviewed later in life, says she doesn't remember the proposal, but what she does remember is that the ring had a really high setting. And so with it being so big, it was hard for Bonnie to be able to wear gloves in class. So she wasn't a big fan of the ring, but she was a fan of possibly getting some freedom from her father. Her father was, the way that they describe him is he was very old school in the sense where, women's roles in the world were a lot different. Mm-hmm. And he didn't think that they, could do as much in a sense. So she also later on said that she thinks the ring was intended to mark his property to the other male coworkers, which, probably.
So the Auburn Journal actually ran a story about that engagement, but no date had been set for the ceremony. So in spring of 1971, Bonnie and Joe were juniors at Cal State Sacramento. And Bonnie at this point was going for nursing, and Joe was going for criminal justice so that he could join the California Highway Patrol. Bonnie describes him as an alpha and said that he needed to control every piece of his life and always be in charge of everything. Mm-hmm. And Bonnie also recalls in interviews that she never really had options or choices in their relationship. He pretty much decided what they were going to do, how they were going to do it, whether it's dinner, where they were going, dates, or sex. She had no options.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that shows by the type of dates that they went on. I don't know if I should call them dates, but just it seemed like all of their outings were nothing that she liked.
Right. Like absolutely nothing.
Mm-mm.
And they
no
both
one would like.
like, let's go spear some frogs and mutilate animals. So they did both have a class together. They took funnily enough, abnormal psychology. And this is kind of the beginning of the end of their relationship. So Joe was failing this class and asked Bonnie to help him cheat. She was a great student by all accounts.
Right.
And so Joe asked her to help him cheat. And that was finally something that she was unwilling to do for him. She discusses in previous interviews that he would ask her to help him with almost everything. And finally she put her foot down and she was like, no. And he was super angry and continually brought it up to her. And He actually used their engagement as a reason that she, quote, had to help him. And she refused to sit next to him to allow him to cheat off of her. And he was like literally batshit livid and insane over it.
Right.
So that was literally the last straw. And she called him to come over to her family home, with her family, mom, dad, and siblings, to break off the engagement. And suffice it to say, Joe did not take it well.
Right. He kept doing the half-assed, but we're meant to be together. Like, we need to be together. He eventually left. He finally just took it. Well, pretended to take it. And he pretended to toss the ring. And the reason why I say pretended is Bonnie says that her and her family really thought he threw it. And they're like, no, we need to give it back. But yeah, she says that her and her family went through every inch to try to find this ring. And after a while, they're like, it is not here. He didn't actually throw it, which is super weird. Like, why would you pretend to throw this diamond ring? So days later, he came back. Remember, they were taking this class together, the psychology class, and he was holding another girl's hand. So Bonnie's just like, okay, look how heartbroken he was. Days before is when we just, threw away our engagement, but sure, have another girl on your hand. So she thought, at least it's over. Well, a couple nights after the hand-holding, Bonnie woke up to a tapping on her window.
Never a good sign.
No, it's not. So he was outside her window with a gun, and he demanded that she got dressed, and they were going to Reno, and they were getting married right now. So from what I understand, it sounds like she kind of got down to the ground and got out of the room as fast as she could, and she woke up her dad. Her dad told her to lock herself in the bathroom and that she shouldn't come out until he came back. So one thing I want to note is he did not call the police.
Nope.
He went outside to talk to him, man to man. So then a little bit later, he goes in and he's like, Bonnie, you can go back to bed. He's gone. And she was just like, okay, I feel like she wanted to know what happened, but because of the relationship with her father, it was just like, his word is gold. I said, go to bed, go to bed. That's the way that I interpret how she talked about that night. And she later talked about how maybe he didn't call the cops because it could have ruined Joe's police career, but she truly didn't know. Mm-hmm. That's so weird. And I don't know if maybe it's just her father and him had a good relationship because they did bond so much over military stuff. Mm-hmm. But I guess after that night, he and her never really spoke about it. And the family was never there to talk to about it just because he never brought it up. The father never brought it up. And that's sad. That's traumatic. Someone pointing a gun at you, you should be able to talk about it.
And she was completely alone and isolated just because her father had that, old school conservative views of women and just the type of man that he was. You don't talk about feelings or things like that. It's over, it's done with, moving on.
Right. Reading about what she went through this night or on this night was just sad. I just felt so bad when she says that she couldn't talk about it. So even though they only ran into each other once again after this, and I think it was when she was pregnant at like a shopping mall, and she doesn't even know if he saw her, but she very much remained on his mind. So in future assaults, victims told police that he said, "I hate you, Bonnie," during the assault.
Man, so when I was following the case, right, the Bonnie thing was a huge just topic, right? For the last 10 years, who is Bonnie? Like, okay, so he was dating a woman named Bonnie. Who's Bonnie? Who's Bonnie?
Right.
And then after he was arrested and Bonnie came forward and all of this information came out about her, my heart broke.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like, people have stalked her on Facebook. She's gotten death threats. People blame her. I mean, literally people are like, okay, well, thanks, Bonnie, for, causing one of the, United States' worst, like, rapist and criminal. Thanks, Bonnie. It's
something about, did she spark it? No, she did not spark this.
There are multiple like actual legitimate news articles, right, that are talking about meet the woman who spurned the East Area Rapist, and like just the way people have written about her is so utterly disgusting.
No, this poor woman, she didn't even live in the country when he was caught, and she got that call like, "Hey, isn't that your ex-boyfriend?"
Yeah, she was living in Italy at the time and got a phone call and like, "Hey, don't you know him? Are you the Bonnie? Are you the Bonnie?" And I was guilty of it. Like when he was caught and people finally ID'd her. I checked out her Facebook page, and it's just so incredibly sad. And as we discuss some of the assaults, right? We'll discuss how like things he said about Bonnie and, so forth, because Bonnie becomes a central figure in a lot of his assaults. And, like as far as this post-arrest speculation of things, I mean, my God, she has utterly been victimized by all of this. She is a victim in all of this.
She is a big victim in all of this. And in one of the interviews, I believe with some of the investigators, they say that when they were trying to pinpoint who to arrest, and they were trying to, put together a profile, they were also looking for a man that had a Bonnie in their life.
Yep.
Whether it be a mother or sister or, an ex-girlfriend or what. Where does Bonnie play, into this story? And then it totally made sense when they found him.
Yep.
So sad. So in 1972, he received the bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So he finally finished.
So less than a year later, that's when the Rancho Cordova cat burglar crimes. So that's when they start. And this is kind of speculative, right? It's still not officially linked to Joseph James DeAngelo, but it's very strongly suspected. Paul Holes and a bunch of other investigators who worked on this case for decades themselves say that they are pretty much sure that the Cordova cat burglar was in fact him.
And so the police started getting these reports about all these burglaries, and then that's where it just went crazy from there. And because I don't want to say just, like the word just isn't fair, but because the beginning crimes were waking up to a strange man in the house and then him leaving, it's hard to find a lot of dates for them, like exact dates.
But it's speculated that it started in 1972 and went through 1973.
So now that we've gotten to where the crimes start, that will be our next episode. We're going to talk about the crimes, what he's accused of, what victims have referenced, and some of it is speculative because he isn't being charged for the cat burglar portion of it. But they're saying that this is kind of where he got his footing.
And then, we have the Visalia Ransacker. And I mean, there are so many phases in this that investigators have kind of pieced together based on MO. And we'll talk about the MO and the methods that he used and how he evolved and what he did. But we will go into that on the next episode.
So the evolution of his crimes, which led us to his arrest that we discussed earlier.
If you're listening to this episode, go to our website, wesawthedevil.com. We will put out this outline as well as resources, right? So a link to that really great LA Times podcast with the interview with Bonnie. Everyone needs to hear that.
I think so, yeah.
It really will give you, I think, a really great glimpse into his psyche and mind of hearing a woman who dealt with him one-on-one, who dated him, right? Was engaged to him, tell her story. And it's really impactful.
Yeah, for sure. And then even a lot of the news when he was arrested, talked to some of the victims, and there's a lot of different interviews with them all over the place. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also like some of them, just how powerful and just strong these women are is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And, also if you really have time in the quarantine and the shelter in place and you have some time on your hands, Oxygen actually has an incredible series too that goes through, and we'll put links to all of this, right? So we will put links and to all of the different resources and things that we recommend. I also have a series of books that I recommend. I read them myself last year, 2 years ago when they came out, by Kat Winters. She's amazing. But yeah, we'll put links to everything on our website. So check that out if you want to kind of get started in researching, or if you're interested in this case, and we will help you go down that rabbit hole.
So this case is probably the case that took the longest to research, because there's so many different, interviews and news articles and, news articles pulled from the 70s and 80s that help tell the story. The amount of crimes that one person committed. There are so many that there's information all over the place. And then there's also information that doesn't always match up. So you have to try to find the root of it. It's just so crazy.
It is insane.
So yeah, we will do another part to this where we will discuss his crimes and give you some more backstory on this crazy guy.
Yep. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you can email us at wesawthedevil@gmail.com. I know that someone tried to reach out to us and said that they worked at the same company that Joe worked at. So, we will be reaching back out to you. But yeah, that is it for this one. If you haven't checked out our Patreon, patreon.com/wesawthedevil. And don't forget to check us out. We're really going to actually start working on YouTube, adding a little something additional to our YouTube videos when we publish the episodes. Right now, we just publish up just image, right? Like our cover photo. Can't guarantee that we're going to have a nice new video for you every week, but we are going to start doing some more stuff for YouTube as well.
Yep. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for all of your comments and emails and reaching out all the time. I love it. And we look forward to reviewing more information with you guys around this case.
And thanks again, guys. And stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay at home, regardless of what people are telling you. If your state is opening, stay at home. And until next crime.